Hello and welcome to Underlord's Universe. And today we are doing part four of a lengthy four-part discussion on the Rush catalog. This is our aggregate episode. We have been doing, we divided up the Rush catalog into three big chunks. And my colleagues here and I have been using a system to rate and rank every album in the Rush catalog. And today what we're going to be doing is doing our overall aggregate ranking. First, we're going to do a little bit of discussion about trends, surprises, expectations, etc. And then we're going to do our own individual countdown of all the Rush albums. And then only I, have the numbers for all of the other guys, and I averaged them all together for a master countdown list. So you guys, you don't know what's coming here. So gosh, did I miss anything else before we enter? Oh yes, of course. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the little bell thing for notifications, add some comments in if you think we're way off on our Rush thoughts here. But guys, do you have anything that you want to say before we jump in here and do our finale episode? None. Okay, so before we do our Rush catalog countdown, I wanted to ask you guys, since we used a system where we total the number of points and then divide to get a score for each album, were there any surprises? Were there anything you expected going in that didn't turn out to be the way that the numbers bared out? What do you guys, what did you experience on that?
Yeah,
There were definitely some surprises.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yep. No, sorry. Yeah, I definitely found that to be true. There are, because of the way we did it, we ranked songs, not albums, and then we derived sort of our album rating based on the songs that were on it. And so some of the albums, like we talked about last time, have fewer songs. And so there are a couple that were really big surprises to me, and people are going to be very angry with me when I reveal my list. I can think of one without naming names that has a 5-star song that nonetheless ended up near the bottom because it only has a few songs on the record, and some of them I ranked relatively low. And so as a whole, the album ranked lower. Whereas if I were off the top of my head picking like what are my top 5 favorite Rush albums, it would definitely be in there. However, it's in the bottom 5 on our ranking because that's just an artifact of how we did this. So that was really fun for me actually to see that, to see sort of overall, like there are a lot of albums we listen to where I love the songs or I love some more than others. And that I would probably gravitate towards, even though there are other albums that have higher ranking songs. So I guess I'm trying to say the ranking isn't always the thing that's like determining whether we like it or not. One of the trends I noticed was I have about 8 songs that are within, if on a 100-point scale, they're within a 6-point range. There are 8 records like all lumped together. And then I have a bunch that are in sort of the next grouping, and I only have one record that ranks in the 90th percentile. So I think my top 2 records for me are not a surprise. The remaining 3 are. I think some of it is a reflection of the time period when I got into Rush, honestly. So I got into Rush in the late 70s, early 80s. So a lot of the songs that are a lot of the albums that rank well for me are from that time period, I think just naturally. But it was nonetheless a bit of a surprise. So I'm not going to give anything else away, but that's sort of my overall sort of picture for this.
Excellent. Josh?
Yeah, this was a lot of fun to do, and some of the stuff not a surprise, but there are a couple of albums that I've been like, just informally, I've been like, oh yeah, that's a top 5 Rush album, and they're not, according to the ranking, they're not. So it
Can I
gets a
ask
little
you,
tough.
can I ask you
Yeah,
about that then?
yeah.
So like you said, if you just go into this without any kind of ranking system and you just say, well, this is my top 5 or whatever order. If you, given the fact that you've now reevaluated it using a system, does that actually change the way you view those albums?
Yes and no. I
Okay.
mean, it definitely there's a couple of albums where I'm like, gosh, I didn't realize how much I love that album.
Mm.
But some of the albums that didn't rank as high as I thought they would, I mean, I'm still a diehard with those albums, and I would still say I really love that album, even though it actually, like one of them that I'm thinking of, and I'll talk about it when we get to it. It's very middle of the road. It's like right in the middle of the catalog, and I was like, oh, that's going to be top 5,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in the middle. So I don't love that album less, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
I just love stuff more.
All right. All right. Or Brent, any trends
Yeah, so for me, I noticed really that throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the ratings kind of got all mixed up. Like there's no, oh, the 70s rated the best, and then there was the 80s or whatever. It was all kind of, jumbled up, which was very interesting. I didn't really expect any trend, nor did I expect what I just described, kind of this jumbled up rankings that I got. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't like the other guys. I had some surprises in terms of, oh, I thought this is going to be a top 5 or 6 album. It's not. And I didn't think this would be a top 5 or 6 record, and it is. So I had a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had some symmetry here because I had like 7 3-star records and 5 3.5-star records, and 7 albums that are 4 or 4.5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of a symmetry there in terms of like 3 different groupings of, like tiers, like the lowest tier, the middle tier, and the upper tier. And lastly, I'll say I had a 31-point spread between the 19th ranked record and number 1. 31 points between number 19 and number 1.
Wow.
So a pretty big gap.
Yeah, that
Okay,
is.
that's weird. I have to interject because that is also my spread. Exactly 31 points.
Is it really?
32. Sorry,
Oh,
it's 32.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Still though, that's pretty insane.
And a lot of albums, and Brian, a lot of albums separated by, like I had some ties, so I had to go to tiebreakers. I had albums that were separated by like less than 1% or 1%.
Yep.
So some of them were really, really close. You had to kind of go to a tiebreaker. So it was kind of like a rock fight. These albums were kind of fighting with each other to get in good positions, and it'll be interesting to go through and see kind of how these all match up.
Yeah, and I think to that point, when you're trying to put a number value on a song, is this a 5, a 4.5, a 4, or whatever? Your mood can impact that stuff on any given day, or you have 2 albums that tie, and then you look at how you rated each individual song, and you say, well, why did I give that one a 3? It's really more like a 3.5. And so it's not a perfect system by any stretch. It's just a way of trying to reevaluate the albums. Like Josh, like you'd said, there's albums that you maybe realize that you liked more than you realized, or vice versa, so or it's a system to try to see if there are trends. I myself expected a couple of albums to rate at the top, and then like number 1 and 2 positions, and I was not surprised. On the other hand, I had a few albums that rated lower than I expected. I'm not going to give away the placing on it, for example, but Presto I thought was going to rate higher than it did, because that's the album that I really got into when I got into Rush. So I kind of thought, oh, that's definitely going to be in the top. Like it's got to be top, whatever. But we'll see. So yeah, okay. Do you want to go ahead and start with our count? They're 19 records, is that right?
Yeah, 19 records.
19. So let's do our countdown. Everybody got your props?
Yep.
Props.
Ready to go? Okay, so we'll do 19 down to numero uno, and then kind of discuss the aggregate, and I'll reshuffle everything so you guys can end up seeing what our combined total comes out to. So okay,
cool.
All right, ready? Number 19. Ooh.
Mm.
Well, Josh and I are right.
Yeah.
Back here. There we go. That's better.
There you go. So roll the ball. Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Wow.
18. In the 18 spot.
Oh, Brian, I.
Wow.
Ooh,
Three of
okay.
us.
Think alike. Oh, yeah, three of us.
Okay.
John,
Well,
I
then
wasn't
there's Roll the Bones again.
I wasn't too far away from John with Roll the
Not
Bones.
at all.
Kind of a surprise, I gotta say.
And in the number 17 spot,
We get some hate for this. I know it.
same here.
Oh
Oh,
boy.
oh, wow.
Mine's sort of in tune with your guys' last two picks.
Nobody has the same number 17, right? They're all different.
Yeah,
That's
they're
right,
all
yeah.
different.
Yeah. Wow, Brian.
Hey, I know.
No, it is what it is.
Right?
Numbers don't
It's that
lie, man.
Rivendell, that darn Rivendell.
What is?
16?
Oh, so Brian, we weren't that far off.
No, not really. Oh, John, Josh, come. Oh, all right.
It's a blender, man.
Josh,
Remember-
look. 16.
Yeah, you and I'll talk later.
Remember how I said, I have like a whole bunch of them that are within the 6-point range. We're
Yeah.
in that area now. We're in
Right.
that.
Right.
This is my next one is going to infuriate people as it infuriated me.
Okay. 15. Oh,
I'm not infuriated, but I'm not really all that surprised. Well, no, I am surprised. I take that back.
Well, so, if I think about this record, the whole first side is one song and it's a 5 and it's the thing I would listen to over and over and over again. But then I had 2 songs on the second side that ranked relatively low and it just tanked a 6-song album. So
And
It works.
and
It works.
yeah. And frankly, for me, I'm actually a second side guy on that album.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
I am too.
interesting.
I am too.
So we're at number
So we're at
14, is
14?
that right? Number
Yeah.
14. Oh, Josh and I are in agreement on that one. Okay.
There's another surprise from John.
Yeah, it
more
is.
infuriating.
Wow.
Again,
Yeah.
there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 songs on this record too. So 1 or 2 lower ones. But again, I just want to remind everyone before the pitchforks come out,
Right.
all these albums are within a 6-point range.
And number 13.
Oh, Josh and I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. In the number 12 spot.
This one I actually thought would rank lower for me.
Oh, you guys are
Josh and I again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just had signals at 13, so we're
We're
close.
right there. Yeah.
Okay. In the number 11 spot. I'm not too far off from where you guys just were.
This was a real surprise for me.
Yeah.
Josh, are you mad at me that this is number 11?
I'm not surprised.
Are you mad at me?
I'm not mad. Just
Josh, you will be happier with me on that one. I remember you were very disappointed in our initial discussion, but I think I will redeem myself today.
So what are we now? This is 10.
Number
So we're in
10. So we're now into the top 10 Rush albums for us individually. In the number 10 spot, Counterparts for me.
wow.
Oh, John and I got Vapor Trails.
Oh, interesting. I'm disappearing, but yes, Vapor Trails.
Mm-hmm.
Here's
Okay.
2112 for me.
Yeah, so that ranked lower probably than you thought too, I assume.
That actually didn't surprise me that much, but
In the number 9 spot for me was Farewell to Kings. Okay. We're all
One
different.
Dang.
Mhm.
this one was a huge surprise for me.
That it was that
This
high.
is the album that I thought would be top 5.
Oh,
No,
Oh,
it's
so
yeah.
ranked lower than you expected.
Yeah, and it's at number 9.
Rearrange here a second.
Well, Josh, to that point, I actually agree with you. My number 8 is Snakes and Arrows,
My number 8 is Snakes and Arrows.
and it ranked a little lower than I expected. I thought it'd be a little higher.
I thought Caress of Steel would be higher for me than it is.
And
Here we
it's
are.
an 8 spot.
Interesting.
Okay. Number 7. And this is
This
where,
is one I thought would be higher for me, but
okay.
it's not.
Yeah, I thought this would be higher.
Number 7. I actually thought Hold Your Fire would be higher for me. Josh, I'm surprised. I thought that would be higher for you too.
This is one I've always said. This is a top 5 Rush album, and here it is at number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my number 6 and number 5 are a tie. Do you want me to just go with my heart and put number
Yes.
6?
When it comes to a
Those
tie,
numbers are
you
the same?
break the tie however you want to break the tie.
I say
Okay.
the heart.
Yeah.
I pulled out the special picture disc for this one.
This is number 6.
Oh, I have that too, dude.
Do you?
This is
Yeah.
number
So
6.
cool.
So this is number 6.
Josh, look, we got the same one.
Ooh.
Yeah, this was a surprise for me.
This
and
was a
I love
surprise.
This album,
Mhm.
This is a
but
surprise
I'm
for me.
surprised it ranked as high as it did.
Me too. I was actually excited this ranked as high as it did. Now we're in the top 5. This is where it really gets.
Yep.
Rubber meets the road.
Yep.
Here you go, Josh. This is for you.
Number
Number
5.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
So John, you and Josh both have Grace Under Pressure. Number 5.
do.
Brent, you have
Yep.
Farewell to Kings. I've got Permanent Waves.
I'm surprised that that's number 5, Permanent Waves. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is what surprised me. Number 4 actually surprised me. My number 4 is Grace Under Pressure.
Nice.
So none of us have the same number 4.
Mm-mm.
No.
No. I always knew I really liked this record, but I just didn't know how comparatively.
All
Oh,
right, here comes some more pitchforks for me.
okay.
Number 3.
Number 3, right?
Oh wow.
Top 3
John.
Rush albums.
My God.
I was not expecting that. I was expecting it to be the
That
top
is
10.
No,
Top 3, no
unexpected.
way.
no, but you know what? Thank you, John, because I thought that Hold Your Fire would rank higher for me because I love that record. So I'm glad to see it represented
Represented. Uh-huh.
Yep. Yep.
For
Number
the
3,
longest time for me, I thought this would be number 1, but it's not.
Uh-huh.
It's not.
Well, in the number 2 spot.
So we're all going to have the number 1, same number 1. I guess we're
No,
not.
no, we're not.
No, we're not going to have. No.
You guys have both the Permanent Waves. Brent, you have Moving Pictures, and my Hemispheres. This and the number 1, I was pretty certain would end up being,
Yeah.
either one of them would be
Okay.
number 1. But
This would be
I
my
was
favorite if I had
surprised.
to pick one.
I kind
But
of
it-
lose sight of Permanent Waves, but ranking it, it's just such a perfect record. So many
Yeah.
ways.
yeah.
I was surprised this was number 2 for me. I didn't expect it to be, but it is.
Did you think it would be lower then?
A little bit lower, yeah.
Okay, the number 1 Rush album in our individual lists based on our data crunching, our calculations. Numero 1, Power Windows for me.
Wow.
Or, Hemispheres for Brent, and John and Josh both with Moving Pictures.
Moving Pictures.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
John and I had the top 2 because John, what was your number 2? Was it Permanent Waves?
It was Permanent Waves.
Yeah, so our top 2 are the same.
That's awesome. Excellent taste.
Okay. So, yeah. I mean, Rush is one of those bands that obviously has been able to, like Getty said, follow their own stream rather than the mainstream. And I think their catalog is so unique. And what is it? Alex has said that the label has never, since day one, ever been, had a finger in what they produced.
Since 2112, certainly. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a moment. It won't take me much more than maybe 30 seconds to a minute here to reshuffle the props here, so I can show you guys our total aggregates as based on the numbers that you guys sent me. So have at it, brief Rush conversation, and we'll get to the
I'm
aggregate.
curious for John and Brent, what was your biggest surprise as you looked at these?
For me, it was 2112 being in the bottom 5. Because if I said
You
one of
wouldn't
my
think
top
that.
5 Rush albums, if I could take on a desert island, 2112 would certainly be in there. And then yet it ended up in the bottom.
One of
It
my
ended up,
biggest
yeah, and it ended up somehow weirdly tied with a Farewell to Kings, and I don't know why I picked a Farewell to Kings higher than 2112. I just did. But that was that and Hold Your Fire in the top three. I knew it
Yeah.
would do well because it's a sentimental favorite for me, but not top three.
Sentimentals, there's a lot of power in sentimental.
Yeah.
You know, I think Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, I was just recollecting earlier when I got those on vinyl back in the day, and just I thought my life was complete. Like everything changed. I remember walking home with those two albums and just being like, there's just such a strong emotional connection for me to those two records. You know, are they really better than a lot of the other albums? I don't know, but
Right.
emotion, you know, I had
Yeah.
to turn on my emotion detector.
Well,
my two biggest surprises were Crest of Steel coming in at number 6. I didn't expect that.
I didn't
And
expect it at number 6 for me.
being an 80% record. And then the other surprise really was how low I rated Roll the Bones. I thought I was surprised it came in second to last. Those two were probably the biggest surprises for me overall.
Yeah. I thought for sure Signals would be in the bottom three for me, but it's sort of, I don't know.
That was another, John, that's a good call out. I mean, I had it at 13, but I probably would have picked that as like the bottom 4.
I agree.
Same.
And it came in at 12 for me.
So Brent, let me ask you then, is that has kind of going through this little exercise made you reevaluate an album like Signals, and are you more inclined to go back to it and you know and listen to it more since you've reevaluated it?
And one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet is one of the great things about these things that we do is it gives us a chance to listen to the whole catalog. I mean, I haven't listened to some of these records in a long time. And to your question, yes. And I think we should probably also say we like all these records. There's none of these records that any of us don't really like, even though we slag on them or we pick on them or whatever. We really like all these records. We just like some more than others. But yeah, to your question, yeah, I would go back, and there's some songs on Signals that maybe I didn't think I liked as much as I actually do. And I think you kind of find that as you're going through this exercise. So it's can be surprising and can be revealing as well.
Yeah,
so,
I certainly don't want to speak for anybody else. I think there's at least one of you that might actively dislike one of these records. I'm thinking of you maybe, but you can speak for yourself. But it's always hard to know, because when we talk about these things, we're always talking about them in the context of other Rush records. So it's like if you take the worst, quote unquote, worst Rush record and put it up against, I don't know, you know, some artist or band that you really dislike, it's no contest. So it's always a relative conversation, I suppose. But are you guys ready?
Or it's like, okay, you're comparing Rush with Rush, so it's like,
yeah,
if you love, you know, what they did on Permanent Waves or whatever, then you get into some of the later 80s albums and you're like, I don't really like the direction they're going in, or I don't like what they're doing with keyboards, or I don't like the production as much. Maybe you could say, yeah, I might like this album with different production, or if it was heavier with more guitars or whatever. So it's all it's all relative, and it's not fair, but that's the only way you can really do it. It's I mean, for me, that's the way I kind of look at it, and I try to be completely unbiased, even though going into some of these things, as we've talked about, you have some preconceived ideas or thoughts, and it is hard to get away from those. It's like sometimes I give a song a 5, I'm like, I didn't think that, or a 4, or whatever. I didn't think that song was that good, or vice versa. So I think we've probably all had those experiences too, which affects the outcome.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's just a Midwestern thing, but I had a little bit of like guilt as I was rating some of these songs. It's like,
I did too. Yeah.
You know, it's like, I love this song, but compared to this other song that I really love, how could I justify giving this one a 5? To me, that's like a 5 is one of these songs. And so relative to that, then where do I put this song? And I found I had some angst about that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to give, you know, if you're going to give The Camera Eye a 5, and you know, how does Red Sector A, you know, you have those things in your head when you're going from album to album to album, and you try to be as fair as you can. But you know, I think what you guys are raising, which is kind of interesting, and maybe we should do another episode on this, but I think it's interesting to think, of the entire Rush catalog, there's very few songs that I actively do not like. I mean, from the debut all the way through Clockwork Angels, almost every single song on every record I actually really like to a certain degree. There's only a handful that I can say I would just skip. So it would be kind of interesting if we did like a list of our top 5 least Rush songs or something like that. So
We should
if
do
you
that.
guys,
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
maybe we'll do that. What do you guys think? Brent,
Sure.
I'm in.
John,
I'm
you're
in.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll save that for later. For now, here's the numbers as aggregated by everything you guys sent me. Okay. I'm just we can't do this with every placement here, but I'm gonna ask you if you guys could predict what the last ranked Rush album would be in this list. What are you gonna guess?
That's for Echo.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Test.
Yeah, I'll agree with
It
Josh. I'll
wasn't
go
my
with
last, but it was your guys' last. Yeah.
It wasn't my last either, but I'll say aggregate. I'll say Test for Echo.
It's third from the bottom, so for me, so yeah.
Yep, Test for Echo came in last, and we'll just kind of run through them at that point here, followed by the debut at the 18, 17. Let's roll the bones.
This is making sense so far.
16, Clockwork Angels.
Interesting.
Yep. 15, Fly By Night. 14, Presto. 13, correct me if I'm getting my numbers wrong. 13 is Hold Your Fire.
Ooh.
Nice big crack on the case.
Should be a lot higher.
I know. I think, are we at 12?
Yep, 12.
Wow,
Paper Trails.
crazy.
11, 2112.
Sorry, I probably tanked the stats on that one.
Mine wasn't too far off. So
I had it at 9, so I think we're all kind of right there in the middle with that.
So just to make sure I got my numbers right.
There should be 10 left.
Yes. In the top 10, the 10 spot for the aggregate Caress of Steel.
wow.
That's a solid showing. I think that's kind of a surprise. That's really cool.
It is kind of cool. And I think what's interesting about it is, even though it ranked lower for me, and like we said, there's not a Rush album I don't like, but I think what's interesting is that it came in right. It just beat out 2112, and yet this is the album that 2112 is supposed to have kind of corrected,
Yes.
the core song.
Progressive Steel and Hold Your Fire were the two hardest for me, I think. The two most controversial for me.
So number 9, Snakes and Arrows. Get my light. There we go.
That's interesting.
8, Signals.
Wow.
Surprised it's that high.
Yeah, me too.
7, Counterparts.
Counterparts doesn't get enough props in the world, I think. So I'm
Great
glad to
album.
see it there.
Yeah.
Great album.
Yep.
And what are we, Brent? 6, right?
Thanks.
Farewell to Kings,
Aha.
number 6.
That's a little low. I would have expected that to be higher.
I know.
Yeah, that's probably me also. Sorry.
All right, top 5 based on our aggregates. Here we go. Grace Under Pressure, number 5.
Yeah.
That's a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
You guys must have.
That was
you guys,
one where I got emotional listening to that album.
Mm-hmm.
It had such an impact on me.
Yeah.
You guys all had that album rated higher than me in that, which is fine. But that I would not have guessed that to be an aggregate top 5.
I have that as my number 5, so I'm right on the money there.
You
Setting
are,
the trend.
Number 4 is Power Windows.
Okay, that's also my number 4.
Was it? Yeah.
So are we gonna? Is this gonna be my top 5 except for Hold Your Fire? I'm really excited now.
Number 3.
Yep.
Excellent.
Number 2. Permanent Waves.
It is my top 5, except swap out Hold Your Fire for Hemispheres.
And number 1, Moving Pictures.
Fantastic.
Which,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, none of us had Moving Pictures at number 1.
I did.
I did.
had it.
Oh, you did. That's right.
I
You
did,
did.
yeah,
You did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Josh, you did too?
I did.
Okay,
There's just
that's
too
right.
many 5s and 4s on that for me for it to not come out.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
just
You know,
did. I was.
happened.
I
You
didn't
guys had the
want Moving
different covers,
Pictures.
right?
I didn't want Moving Pictures to be the number one album because it
Same.
is their most popular, iconic album. So it's like,
Yes.
I like deep cuts and everything, but it's
Yep.
just
It's
you can't
undeniable.
argue with this record. It's too perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the thing about averaging them though, it's just by the nature of doing averages, it is possible that an album, could, if we really went through and compared this aggregate list to each one of our individual rankings, some of these things would look a little wonky because, that's the nature of averaging things. And I was just kind of interested to see how it all came out. I'm not terribly surprised overall. I think
No.
one of the neat surprises is Grace Under Pressure was
Yeah.
much higher than expected. I think the fact that Caress of Steel, even though I personally, because I just love side 2, John, I'm different. You're more of a side 1 guy on 2112. I'm a side 2 guy on 2112. For me, that outranks Caress of Steel for that. But at the same time, I do have a soft spot for Caress of Steel, so it's like it's cool to see it, end up.
Yeah.
Was it number 10? Is that right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think if we look at the trends, I mean, I feel like all of us trended towards the list that you just presented with maybe 3 albums that for each of us that were not quite in line with that list, that they were super high or super low compared to everybody else's. But by and large, as I look at my list and think over the list you just read, it tracks pretty well, except like I said, maybe 3 records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 It's problematic for me that, like, from Counterparts, that's number 8. All their stuff from that time forward is in the lower tier of these albums, which I have a hard time with because I love Counterparts. I love Vapor Trails and Snakes and Arrows. It was a little hard for me that those ranked where they did. I thought that all of those albums would just be much higher. It's hard, and it's hard for me to say, even though, like a Caress of Steel ranked higher than Counterparts. I mean, if push comes to shove, I'm probably gonna say Counterparts is a better record.
Yeah, so there's the question
Yeah,
of,
well.
push comes to shove, which is the better record? And then the other question, though, is if you had to pull one of those out between those two, which one would you listen to most likely? Is it the same as what you would pick for the better record? Or is it the one that, your heart
good
tells you
question.
is the better one?
It just it depends. There's just that moment where, I'm so in the mood for Caress of Steel. I need that 70. I mean, Caress of Steel is in my opinion, the first progressive metal album. Progressive metal. And I mean, there's something about the sound of that album. I'm
Mhm.
contradicting myself from just 2 minutes ago, but there is something about that album that's like, it's pure magic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
We've
hard.
talked about, the tone, the way it sounds, the song. It is. It's very magical. And I defy anybody of that era to challenge Alex Lifeson's guitar tone on that record.
Oh,
I mean, it's
God,
just
it's
so
so
good.
Well, isn't
It's
it
so
interesting?
good.
I think throughout all of the previous discussions that we had when we were going through each album a little bit more specifically, we kept that was the constant theme that kept coming up was Alex's guitar, his
Oh yeah.
his guitar playing and his tone, which changed, of course, throughout his career. But I mean, God, even in the 80s, I think he's an underrated guitar player. He talks a lot about, in the 80s on albums like Power Windows, like, oh, where do I fit in and this and that. But it's like, I think that kind of pushed him to be a pretty creative guitar player.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
love his guitar playing on those albums.
This
I do too.
exercise did heighten my appreciation for Alex.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, I mean, it's not that it's not that I didn't appreciate him. It's not that he's not always been one of my favorite guitar players, but I think that doing this exercise, I came away saying, pure genius as a player, just pure genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So overlooked and underrated as a player.
Yes.
Well, because he gets so overshadowed by just how busy
Yeah.
Geddy and Neil are as a rhythm section. So,
Well, and how much he adapted, I mean, they all adapted to some extent and got better and changed how they did things. But I would say overall, Alex's adaptation in terms of being a guitar player and his tones, and Geddy's adaptations and how he changed his voice,
mhm.
to me are like the things that really, those things are like strongly developed over their 40-year career. All of them did, and all of their instruments. But to me, those things really stand out, even above the others.
So
But I'm not a percussionist, so I might be being unfair because I always think Neil came out of the womb as the best ever. So he wouldn't
well,
have said that, but
so I got a question for you guys. Obviously, there, the Rush catalog is what it is. It's never going to be added to, right? And both, I think, on most of our individual lists, Clockwork Angels might have ranked a little lower than we would have expected. Certainly in the aggregate list, it was down there. It's down there on my list. How do you guys feel about the final album in Rush's career not ranking as high? I mean, I know a lot of people love it. I know a lot of people like it more than Snakes and Arrows. I much prefer Snakes and Arrows start to finish. But how do you guys feel about Clockwork Angels being the album that closes out their catalog, considering we didn't rate it as high?
that's a good question. For me, it ranked decently high. I think I had it as number 7. I was just trying to count my numbers here. When it came out, I remember thinking it felt like a final album for some reason, and I don't know why. I mean, we kind of all knew that Neil was getting ready to not be wanting to tour anymore. They'd kind of talked about that. But as I listened to it, and especially when The Garden came on, I'm like, well, this definitely feels like a final record and a final song to me. I thought it was wildly creative compared to some of the stuff they had been doing. I thought it was really interesting. I loved the production on it. I love that they were doing a story, regardless of what the story was or how well somebody may or may not like the story. They did a story. They kind of went back to their roots of having kind of nodding to their earlier era of progressiveness. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings because I like the record and I think it sounds good, and I like it better than Snakes and Arrows. So
yeah, it's interesting, and it's hard to separate these things from your own personal experiences.
yes,
When Snakes and Arrows came out, our dad was, I mean, what, Brent, within a month of passing away, and there's so many just lyrical themes on Snakes and Arrows that really kind of touched a nerve for me in that time. So it's hard to separate that. And I think I said in the other episode, when it comes to Clockwork Angels, I just like I loved Richard Schickey's mix on Caravan and BU2B, and then for the album versions, Nick Raskulinecz mixed the whole album, and I just don't think it quite pops the way that those songs could. But and there, I don't know, there's just some things about the album that just kind of don't. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like the album a lot. And I actually agree. The Garden is like, I mean, to me, that's a 5-star song. And The Garden it's a 5-star way to end their recording career. It just, it works for the concept, for the story. It also works, conceptually as a statement about Neil and where he was in his life. And, I think it's one of Rush's crowning moments, although I don't necessarily see the full album that way. But I do like it. I mean, like I said, when we make a list of like worst Rush songs of all time, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at it, but I don't know if anything from that album will actually make that list, but we'll see.
right. It was also an interesting opportunity. I was really pleased when they did that tour and they brought some strings with them. I thought that was cool because that, to me, they had been sort of, I think for good reason, inflexible sort of in their approach to how they wanted to tour. They wanted to just be the 3 of them making all of the notes. And I have an immense respect for that. That's a phenomenal thing to try to undertake.
Yeah.
But I like that they went, for this one, let's do something a little different. Let's try something. It's the way that they spent their whole career. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's experiment with this. And sometimes it worked great and sometimes it didn't. But I would rather have that than somebody who keeps putting out the same record over and over and over again. And I just love that on the live tour, they had that kind of flexibility of this would be really cool. Let's,
Yeah.
and not only let's bring them out for the songs from the record, but let's sort of retrofit some strings into previous songs that we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
really fun as
and
an audience member.
you're hinting there at another episode we could do here, because take a song like Dreamline. It's really, really tough for me, because my favorite version of Dreamline very well might be the version on Snakes and Arrows Live, except it might be the version that's on the Clockwork Angels Tour live album because of the string section. So it's like, how do you compare live versions and live albums and stuff? So I do think that that's a really cool part of that live album. So,
yeah.
But there's more to come, folks. More to come. More to deal with. Brent, you've been kind of quiet for the last moment or so here. Any final thoughts in terms of the overall catalog?
No, just that they were so successful from the beginning to the end, despite the changes and trends in music. They did everything really well. You were talking about Alex's guitar tone, so different in the mid 70s as to what he sounded like and how he was playing in the mid 80s, but it worked. Every time you hear him play, you know it's him. Nobody sounds like him. No band ever sounded like them. So they carved out their own niche, no matter what it was. Like Josh says, doing, the first progressive metal album with Caress of Steel, which I would agree with that, and how brilliant that is. And then you compare that with something like Signals or Hold Your Fire, and they never made the same album twice. I think a lot of our favorite bands, with maybe some exceptions, are like that. They never really made this. They followed some trends, but they did things their way, and it always sounded like Rush. No matter what they did, it sounded like them. They never lost that musical integrity, and I think that's very important as we go through this.
Yeah,
they just had it, whatever it was, they had it, and it was very special.
Cool. Well, personally, I'm not above going back through and re-rating all of these all over again, just to see if the scores actually.
Now that we talked about them,
yeah, it's like, okay, was I accurate with myself and my own scores? So at any rate, well, cool, guys. It's been kind of a long project, but I appreciate everybody willing to jump in here and do this, and I think it's been fun. So we'll do some other Rush stuff in the future, because we like talking about Rush, right? I mean, it's kind of makes sense. So any parting thoughts from you guys? I have one on another note, on a non-Rush related note. So
I got nothing.
Okay. Well, tell you what, the last thing we're going to say is that we recently put out a brand new song of our own. It's called Ordo Abstrusus Oculus, and it has a guest vocal by former Iron Maiden vocalist Blaze Bayley. And we'll put a link to the Bandcamp link below, and we'll also put a YouTube link to a little YouTube video that we put together for it. And if you stuck with this entire conversation, you could give another 7.5 minutes to that song. I mean, we'd really appreciate it. So, and check out some of the other stuff that we do. That'd be really great. And other than that, I got nothing. I think I'm good for the day. What do you guys say?
Sounds
good. Good way to end it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.